Have you ever felt like your life was being shaken, like everything around you was crumbling and nothing made sense anymore? Maybe you've been facing unexpected setbacks, doors closing in your face, and people walking away from your life. Let me tell you something today. This is not the end. In fact, it could be the clearest sign that God is preparing you for something far greater than you ever imagined. Too often, when we're on the verge of a major breakthrough, the enemy tries to discourage us. Doubt creeps in, fear takes hold, and we start questioning if we're even on the right path. But what if I told you that these struggles, these battles, and even the pain you're feeling right now are actually signs that God is shifting things in your favor? Tonight, I want you to listen closely, because what I'm about to share could change the way you see your situation. I will reveal 6 powerful signs that God is preparing you for something big. And when you recognize these signs, you will no longer feel lost, but instead you will walk with confidence, knowing that your breakthrough is near. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Now, I need you to hear me when I say this. Before something great happens in your life, before God blesses you with something bigger than you ever prayed for, there will be challenges. Not just any challenges, but unusual ones. Struggles that come out of nowhere. You'll face opposition that makes no sense. Everything will seem like it's working against you. And you'll wonder, why now? Why is this happening to me? But I want you to shift your perspective tonight, because this is not the time to give up. This is the time to press in. You see, when God is about to do something extraordinary in your life, the enemy will do everything possible to shake you, because the enemy knows that once you step into what God has for you, once you receive that breakthrough, once you walk in that anointing, nothing will be able to stop you. And so the distractions will come. People you trusted might turn against you. Doors you were counting on might suddenly slam shut. You may even start feeling like you're losing everything. But I want you to understand this. When life gets harder right before a blessing, it's not a coincidence. It's confirmation. Have you ever seen an arrow being pulled back? The further it is pulled, the farther it will launch. And some of you in this room, some of you listening right now, feel like you've been pulled so far back that you don't know how much more you can take. But what if I told you that you're not being pulled back to stay there? You're being positioned to be launched. The tension, the resistance, the hardship, it's all working together to propel you into something greater. There was a time in my life when I faced rejection after rejection. Doors kept closing. People kept telling me no. You're not good enough. You don't belong here. And there were moments when I started to believe them. Moments when I questioned if I was even supposed to keep going. But deep down, I knew something. I knew that God had placed a calling on my life that no man could take away. And I'm standing here today because I refuse to let the obstacles define me. I want you to hear me when I say this. What you're going through right now is not the end of your story. Think about Joseph. He had a dream, a God-given vision of greatness, but what happened next? He was betrayed, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and locked away in prison for years. Imagine how discouraged he must have felt. Imagine how many times he could have given up, but he didn't. Because what looked like setbacks were really setups. And when the time was right, when he was truly prepared for the blessing, God elevated him to a position of power he could have never reached on his own. That's what I want you to remember. The trouble you're facing is not a sign that you're losing. It's a sign that you're about to win. It's proof that something is shifting. You're in the stretching season. God is refining you, preparing you, because what he has for you is too big for the level you were on before. You had to grow. You had to be tested. You had to walk through the fire so that when you step into your blessing, You won't just have the promise, you'll have the character to sustain it. I know it's hard when things don't make sense. I know it's painful when the journey feels lonely, but I'm here to tell you, hold on. Don't you dare give up now. If you knew what was on the other side of this season, you wouldn't waste a second doubting, because the greater the opposition, the greater the reward. And when God steps in, when he finally moves, it won't just be a small blessing. It will be something so big, so undeniable, that you'll look back at everything you went through and say, now I understand. Now I see why I had to go through that. Because this right here was worth every tear, every struggle, and every sleepless night. And when that moment comes, when you step into your blessing, don't just celebrate, testify. Let the world know what God has done, because somebody else needs to hear your story. Somebody else is walking through the fire right now, feeling like there's no way out. And you might be the voice that reminds them to keep going. So stand strong, keep the faith, because if life is shaking you right now, it's only because something greater is on its way. There comes a moment in life when the noise starts to fade. The people you once leaned on aren't as present anymore. The invitations stop coming. The phone calls slow down. And suddenly you find yourself in a season of isolation, a season where it feels like God has removed every familiar thing, every comfort, and every crutch you've ever had. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake this season for rejection. You'll mistake it for abandonment. But I need you to hear me when I say this. This is not punishment, this is preparation. When God is about to do something big in your life, he will separate you. He will pull you away from distractions, from unhealthy attachments, from relationships that can't go where he's taking you. Because let me tell you something, not everyone is meant to walk with you into your next season. Some people were only meant for a chapter, not the whole story. And if you're wondering why certain people have walked away, why you feel so alone, why doors have shut that you never expected to close, I want you to consider this. Maybe it's not rejection. Maybe it's protection. Maybe God is making room for something greater. You see, and when you're surrounded by too much noise, it's hard to hear God. When you're always busy, always distracted, always seeking validation from others, you can miss the very thing God is trying to show you. So sometimes he has to pull you away. He has to bring you into a quiet place where it's just you and him, a place where you're forced to listen, forced to reflect, forced to grow. And I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's lonely. But trust me, there is power in this season. There is transformation in this season. Look at the greatest leaders, the most powerful voices, the people who have changed the world. Every single one of them went through a season of isolation before they stepped into their purpose. They had to be set apart. They had to learn who they were without the opinions of others. They had to develop a strength that wasn't dependent on applause or approval. Because let me tell you something, if you need people to validate you, you will never fully walk in what God has called you to do. You have to get to a place where you're so secure in who you are, so grounded in your purpose, that even if no one claps for you, you keep going. Even if no one believes in you, you still show up. Even if you have to stand alone, you stand tall. And I know that's not easy. I know it hurts when people walk away. I know it stings when the people you thought would be with you forever suddenly disappear. But here's what I've learned. When people walk away, let them. When God closes a door, stop trying to force it open. Stop chasing after things and people that he is removing from your life, because what's ahead of you is so much greater than what's behind you. And sometimes you won't see it right away. Sometimes it won't make sense. But if you trust the process, if you trust that God knows what he's doing, one day you'll look back and realize that every loss was making space for something better. So if you're in a season right now where you feel isolated, if you feel like God has pulled you away from everything familiar, don't fight it. Don't rush it. This is where he's doing his greatest work in you. This is where he's molding you, preparing you, strengthening you. Because what he's about to release in your life, what he's about to bless you with, requires a different version of you. A stronger version, a wiser version. A version of you that isn't afraid to stand alone if it means standing in purpose. So embrace this season. Lean into it. Use this time to build, to heal, to grow. Because when God finally opens that next door, when he finally releases what he's been preparing for you, you won't just be ready, you'll be unstoppable. Have you ever woken up one day and felt like something in your life just doesn't fit anymore? Like the things that used to excite you don't move you the same way? The places you used to go, the people you used to be around, the conversations you used to enjoy, suddenly none of it feels right. It's like your spirit is restless, unsettled, like you're being pulled towards something, but you don't even know what it is yet. That right there is a sign. That's God stirring something in you. Because when he's about to do something big in your life, he won't let you stay comfortable. He won't let you settle for where you are when he knows there's more for you. And so he puts this feeling inside of you, this divine discomfort that won't let you be at peace with what no longer serves you. That's why some of you have been feeling uneasy. That's why you've been looking at your life and asking, is this it? That's why you've been feeling like something has to change, like you're outgrowing the things that used to feel right. That feeling is not a coincidence. It's not something you should ignore. It's God waking you up. It's him shaking you, trying to get your attention, trying to push you toward the next level. Because here's the truth. Growth is not supposed to feel comfortable. Transformation is not supposed to be easy. If you're in a place right now where you're feeling restless, where you feel like the life you've been living doesn't fit anymore, it's because God is trying to show you that there is more. But here's where most people get stuck. Instead of listening to that feeling, instead of moving forward, they try to force themselves to stay where they are. They try to shrink themselves to fit into a life that's too small for them. They try to quiet that voice inside of them because stepping into something new is scary. But let me tell you something. Staying in a place where you don't belong is even scarier. Holding on to what God is trying to remove will only delay the blessing that's waiting for you. And I get it. I know change is uncomfortable. I know the unknown is terrifying. But if God is making you uncomfortable in your current situation, it's because he's preparing something greater. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know exactly what's next. You just have to trust that if he's calling you out of something, it's because he's getting ready to lead you into something better. So stop fighting the restlessness. Stop trying to convince yourself that you should be happy where you are when deep down you know you're being called to more. Some of you have been feeling this for months, maybe even years. You've been feeling this pull, this shift, but you've been too afraid to move. Afraid of what people will say, afraid of failing, afraid of leaving behind what's familiar. But let me ask you, what if the very thing you're afraid to leave is the thing that's holding you back? You cannot grow if you refuse to let go. You cannot step into your destiny if you're still clinging to a past that no longer fits you. And I know it's hard. I know it feels like you're walking away from everything you've ever known. But if you keep ignoring that feeling, if you keep forcing yourself to stay where you don't belong, you will never step into the fullness of what God has for you. So I want you to ask yourself, what is God calling you to walk away from? What is he trying to move you to walk away from? What have you been feeling in your spirit that you've been too afraid to acknowledge? Because that feeling that restlessness isn't going anywhere. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep showing up. It's going to keep whispering to you until you finally listen. So don't fight it. Lean into it. Because when you finally stop resisting, when you finally surrender to where God is leading you, you'll realize that everything you were afraid of losing was nothing compared to what He was trying to give you. Isn't it funny how just when you think nothing is working out, something unexpected happens? Just when you've convinced yourself that the door is permanently shut, suddenly, out of nowhere, an opportunity appears. A connection is made. A person enters your life that shifts everything. And you realize that what you thought was the end was actually just the setup for something greater. That is how God moves. Because when He is about to give you something big, He will align things in ways you never could have planned. He will introduce people into your life who have the exact resources, wisdom, or connections you need. He will open doors you never even knocked on. And I know it's hard to see it when you're in the waiting season. I know it's frustrating when every attempt you've made has failed, when every plan you've put together seems to fall apart. But let me tell you something. What's meant for you will not miss you. The connections, the opportunities, the blessings, they are already assigned to your name. And I need you to really understand this. You don't have to force what's meant for you. You don't have to beg for it. You don't have to manipulate or fight for a seat at the table that God has already prepared for you. Because when the time is right, the right people will show up. The right doors will open. The right opportunity will find you. And when it does, you'll know it wasn't because of your own strength. It wasn't because you pushed your way in. It was because God placed you there. Have you ever met someone and instantly it felt like divine timing? Like that meeting was supposed to happen? That's because it was. That's because God is strategic. He knows exactly who you need to meet, exactly when you need to meet them, and exactly how that relationship will shape your journey. But here's the catch. You have to be in position to receive it. You have to be willing to walk through the doors when they open. Because too many times people miss their blessings because they're too afraid to step into the unknown. They pray for a breakthrough, but when the opportunity comes, they let fear talk them out of it. I want you to think about how many times you've asked God for something, and then when the opportunity came, you hesitated. You second-guessed yourself. You told yourself you weren't ready. But let me tell you something. God wouldn't bring the opportunity if you weren't ready. He wouldn't send the right people into your life if it wasn't time for you to step forward. So stop questioning it. Stop doubting yourself. If He's placing something in front of you, it's because He already knows you have what it takes. And I know some of you have been waiting for a long time. Some of you have been wondering if you've been forgotten. But I need you to know that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Sometimes the delay is divine. Sometimes God is working behind the scenes, arranging things in ways you can't even see yet. But when it's time, it will happen suddenly. One moment, nothing will make sense. And the next, everything will start falling into place. So I don't want you to get discouraged in the waiting. I don't want you to believe the lie that you've missed your chance. Because what God has for you is still yours. The right people are already being positioned to meet you. The right doors are already waiting to be open. And when they do, don't shrink back. Don't doubt yourself. Walk through them with confidence, knowing that you didn't get there by accident. You got there because you were meant to. There comes a time in life when everything around you starts to shift. The way you think changes, the way you speak, the way you see yourself, the way you see your purpose. It all begins to transform. And you don't always notice it at first. Sometimes it happens so subtly that you only realize it when you look back and think, I'm not the same person I used to be. That's how you know God is preparing you for something bigger. Because before he blesses you with more, he changes you first. You see, too often, people want the blessing, but they don't want to become the person who can handle the blessing. They want success, but they don't want to develop the discipline that success requires. They want influence, but they don't want to grow the character that influence demands. But God doesn't work like that. He's not going to give you something you're not ready to sustain. He loves you too much to bless you with something that will destroy you because you weren't prepared for it. So before he changes your circumstances, he changes you. He stretches your mindset. He deepens your faith. He builds your patience. And that's where the real work happens. Because it's easy to say you want something big. It's easy to pray for increase. But are you willing to go through the process that comes before the promise? Are you willing to do the work when no one is watching? Are you willing to grow when it's uncomfortable, when it's inconvenient, when it feels like nothing is happening? Because that's what it takes. That's what separates those who only dream about greatness from those who actually step into it. And I know that growth isn't always pretty. I know it's hard when you feel like you're being stretched beyond your limit. But what if I told you that everything you're experiencing right now, the lessons, the challenges, the uncomfortable moments, isn't happening to you, but for you? What if I told you that the very things you're struggling with today are shaping you into the person who'll be ready for the blessing tomorrow? Think about it. Maybe you're in a season where God is teaching you patience, because the blessing he has for you requires endurance. Maybe you're learning how to manage what you have now because he's about to increase it, and he needs to know you can handle more. Maybe he's working on your confidence, your discipline, your ability to handle pressure, because what's coming is going to require you to stand strong. And that's why you can't skip this part. That's why you can't rush ahead or try to take shortcuts, because what God is doing in you is just as important as what he's about to give you. If you're praying for something bigger, ask yourself, am I becoming the person who can handle it? Am I developing the mindset, the habits, the strength to carry what I'm asking for? Because if you're not ready, the blessing won't come. Not because it's not for you, but because God is waiting for you to step into the version of yourself who can receive it. So don't resist the growth. Don't fight the stretching. Don't get frustrated when things don't happen as fast as you want them to. Because if God is working on you, it means he's getting ready to bless you. And when the time is right, when you've become the person who is fully prepared for the next level, you won't have to force anything. You won't have to chase after it. The blessing will come and you'll be ready to receive it. There comes a moment right before everything changes when you will be tested like never before. When it feels like the weight of everything is pressing down on you. When the obstacles seem bigger than ever, the setbacks come one after another, and nothing seems to be working out. It will feel like you're pushing, and yet somehow the breakthrough still hasn't come. But let me tell you something. This is not the time to give up. This is not the time to back down, because what you are facing right now, this pressure, this resistance, is not a sign that you've lost. It's a sign that you're right on the edge of something greater. Before God blesses you with something big, before he takes you to the next level, there is always one final test, one last stretch that feels impossible, one last moment where you question everything, your faith, your strength, your purpose. And if you don't know what's really happening, you'll think it means you're failing. You'll think it means that maybe this isn't meant for you after all, but that's not true. The resistance isn't there to stop you. It's there to prepare you. It's there to make sure that when the blessing comes, you can handle it. Think about it. Every great thing in life requires pressure before it's fully formed. Gold has to go through fire before it shines. Diamonds have to endure extreme pressure before they emerge in their brilliance. And if you want to step into something extraordinary, if you want to receive something greater than you've ever had before, you have to be willing to go through the process. You have to be willing to hold on when everything inside of you is telling you to quit, because that is when most people give up. Right when they're closest to their breakthrough. And I know it's hard. I know what it feels like to give your best, to do everything right, and still feel like you're coming up short. I know how exhausting it is to keep believing when you don't see the results yet. But let me tell you something. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because you don't feel like things are moving doesn't mean that God isn't working behind the scenes. Some of the biggest breakthroughs happen in silence. Some of the greatest shifts take place when you least expect them. But if you walk away too soon, if you quit just before the finish line, you'll never know what was waiting for you on the other side. So this is where you have to decide. Are you going to let the struggle break you? Are you going to let the pressure make you give up? Or are you going to let it prepare you for the greatness that's coming? Because I promise you, if you can just hold on a little longer, if you can push through this last test, everything is about to change. That blessing you've been praying for, it's already on its way. That opportunity you've been waiting for, it's closer than you think. But you have to be standing when it arrives. You have to be ready when the door opens. So don't give up. Not now, not when you're this close. Keep going, keep believing, keep pushing, because the very thing you've been waiting for is just on the other side of this moment. And when it comes, when you finally step into everything that was meant for you, you'll look back at this season and realize it wasn't breaking you, it was building you.